The story begins in 1963. Yigal Yadin and his team performed famous archaeological excavations in the famous world-renowned fortress known as Masada or Masada. When Yigal Yadin is doing the archaeological diggings in Masada, more than 1900 years after the original story in 73, after the Common Era, 3 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, something extraordinary happens. He sees Josephus was right. He finds storages of food 1900 years later in the places that Josephus described, and among the items he finds, the seeds of a palm date. That's what he finds. It's put away with other items in Bar Ilan University in Tel Aviv, and it remains there for 40 years. In 2005, that's 15 years ago, Israeli botanists decide to do an experiment. What if we would take these seeds found in Masada from the year 73 and plant them and create conducive conditions for a palm tree to grow? Would we perhaps be able to actually taste the very same dates that our ancestors ate during the second Beis HaMikdash? Just like if you lived then and you took the seed of a date and you planted it, you would have the very dates that were at that time eaten and consumed. Those dates we have seeds from them. Of course, they didn't give it much hope. You have seeds that have been incubated, laying in a hole in the ground for 2,000 years. I mean, they're numb and lifeless and dead and seem emaciated and dried. What are you going to do with it? Who plants seeds 2,000 years old? But Jews are stubborn. And they planted the seeds. As Professor Levy said, she was one of the botanists, the researchers involved, she said, for me, the likelihood that anything would happen was null. How shocked she and her colleagues were a few months later when they noticed a crack in the earth. A young sapling, a young palm tree began to develop. And some time later, the tree began growing and growing. And a few years later, it became a tree. They named it Misushelach. You know why Misushelach? Because he lived 960 years in Parshas Bereishis, and they felt this sapling deserves to be named Misushelach. It's been around for 2,000 years. But then came disappointment. She realized that this was a male tree. So you'll have a trunk, you'll have branches, you'll have leaves, but it will never be able to produce fruits, dates. Disappointment. But she didn't stop. She went on to search for more seeds. And then one day, in the Judean desert, near Yericho, near Jericho, not so far from the Qumran caves where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 40s, she came across ancient dates that were even more ancient than the dates found in Masada that come from the era of the Churban Bayesheni. These, not ancient dates, ancient seeds of dates, dated back hundreds of years before those dates. And she decided, we're going for it again. We're going to plant these seeds. She did. Now, how often do miracles happen? Now she really didn't expect anything. We may got lucky once, we're going to get lucky twice. How shocked she was when these plants in the kibbutz Keturah in southern Israel, Negev, it needs a lot of heat. Those were the conditions conducive, not so far from Eilat, that kibbutz, the Negev, the south of Israel. After a few months, sapling emerged. And then, after 6 years, a tree with flowers. She realized this is a female, and she named it Hannah. Hannah. For whom? The person we read about, Rosh Hashanah. The woman who couldn't have children, v'chana akara lepnina yiladim, l'chana ein yiladim, and then Eli blesses her. She comes to the Mishkan and she's blessed with the Navi Shmuel as a child. Moshe v'ari b'chayna v'shmuel b'kayri shmai. So she named this female date tree Hannah. Beautiful flowers. Now it's time for matchmaking. Now it's time for a shidduch. So they take pollen from the Misushelach male. They pollinate the flowers of Hannah, and they hope for the next miracle. And indeed, just a few weeks ago, the tree produced for the first time beautiful, large, lush, handsome, good-looking, geschmacke, gedichte, delicious dates. But let me tell you about the seeds of Hannah. The first seeds from Mr. Shelach came from the time of Masada, the end of Bayesheni. These other seeds from the female date tree that produced the dates were dated, they're 400 or 500 years before that, which means the 4th century before the Common Era, and they identified it as seeds that came from Iraq, from Bavel. This is, of course, the era of Churban Bayis Rishon, when the Jews were exiled from Eretz Yisrael by Nebuchadnezzar into Bavel, into Babylonia, present-day Iraq, and the same century when they come back with Ezra and Nehemiah and Zerubbabel, the time of Chagai, Scharya, Malachi, the era of Purim, when Cyrus the Great gives the Jews permission to come back. And apparently they brought with them seeds and dates from Iraq that end up in Eretz Yisrael, including in the Judean desert. And now it came the time for the scientists to pluck the dates. And they surround the tree and they pluck the first dates. Somebody makes a bracha, Baruch.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen.
They eat the dates. And then one of the people there said the pasuk, Tzadik hatomar yifrach keres bavon yizkeh. One of the scientists, name is Yosef Abramowitz, he said, we were so emotional, we started to cry so much that our tears could have watered and irrigated another tree. That's how emotional we were. I don't know when was the last time you saw somebody eating a date and sobbing, but I know why they were emotional. They were holding the very dates that Jews ate 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. Dates that really represented seeds that lived through Churban Bayis Rishon and Churban Bayis Sheni. They were eating those very dates that came 2,500 years ago, back to Eretz Yisrael, after they were exiled by Nebuchadnezzar to Babylonia. It seemed like the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed forever, Jewish Commonwealth is over forever, Babylonia triumphed. But the Jews 70 years later came back, but only to be exiled again. Another Beis HaMikdash destroyed again 420 years later. And then hunted down and persecuted and murdered and scattered all around the world. And then in our generation, came back in the millions to our eternal homeland in Eretz Yisrael, found those very seeds, planted them, and could make a bracha with the double meaning both of a Pri Chadash and a real Pri Chadash, a Pri that dates back so many years. And they're eating the dates that come from the time of Mordechai and Esther, Yirmiyah, Hanavi, and Yecheskel, Chagai, Scharya, Malachi, Ezra and Nehemiah. In my mind, that's a miracle. Because it's not just about the dates. First of all, they said that the dates were delicious. I only saw the pictures, so I didn't taste them. They said they were delicious and they tasted like honey of a beehive, which is fascinating because the Torah says, Eretz Zovas Cholav Udvash. Eretz Chitu Soida Gefen Teina V'Nim Eretz Eshem and Udvash. And Chazal say, which dvash is this? It's not the honey of a beehive. It's the honey of Tamarim. It's the date honey, and it said that these dates tasted like honey, and they came from the time of Bayis Sheni and Churban Bayis Rishon. But I thought to myself, what a metaphor and a reflection of Tzadik HaTomar Yifrach Ki Ha'adam Eitz HaSada, of the Jewish soul. If this is true about the Jewish date, how much more so is it true about the Jewish soul? You know, sometimes you look at a Jewish soul, and it's been incubated for 2,000 years, for 2,500 years, or for 50 years, or for a century, or for 10 years, 20 years, and you look at it, and it seems lifeless. It seems Chalila dead, numb, apathetic, indifferent, dried up, emaciated. We sometimes look at ourselves or our loved ones, and it seems like the soul has been snuffed out. Or as Yecheskel says in his famous Nevuah of the dry bones, Atzamas hayavashis, the bones have become skeletons and they're dry. And I'm not talking here only physically, I'm talking emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. Yeah, I may go through the rituals, Rosh Hashanah, Smei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Chanukah, Purim, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, but I'm dry, I'm numb. There's so much stress in me, there's so much anxiety. We look at ourselves, or we look at our loved ones, or we look at other people, and we see a soul that seems to have been in the ground for thousands, or hundreds, or dozens of years, or a few years. And it's so dry, it's so dry. There's nothing there. But look again, look again. You could look at these seeds and say, they're dead. Look again. Take these seeds and put them back where they belong. Plant them in their natural environment. Give them sunlight. Give them water. Give them earth. Give them air. Give them the nutrients that they need. And suddenly, these ancient seeds that have been declared dead for millennia will be vibrating with life, will be bustling with life. Isn't this true about every single one of God's children? Bonim atem Hashem Elokeichem, bein kach ubein kach atem kruyim bonim. Never, ever underestimate the deep spiritual vibrancy and depth in your soul. But every Jewish soul is a chelik elikam mal mamash. It's a fragment kavayochel of the Rebbeinu Shalom, a piece of Hashem, a ray of infinity, a fragment of heaven on earth. Even if you look at a soul like yours, or your child's, or your grandchild's, or your friend's child, or anybody, and it seems emaciated and dry, don't fall prey to the external facades, to the external deceptions. Al tabet al mareyu, Hashem says to Shmuel Hanavi. Ki ha'adam yireh le'einayim v'Hashem yireh le'vav. Look deeper. Go deeper. Because just like those seeds, they had the DNA of 2,500 years of Eretz Yisrael and of Jewish history. And what does your soul have? Your soul has the DNA of 3,800 years of Jewish history. Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov, Rachel and Leah. Moshe Rabbeinu and Yehoshua, Shimshon and David and Shlomo. Yirmiyah and Yecheskel and Amos and Chagai. Mordechai and Esther. The Zugas and the Tanoim and Amiroim. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon. The Rabbanon Sforoi, the Gaonim, the Rishonim and the Acharonim. And your matriarchs, your great-grandmothers of thousands of years, all live, epigenetics, they all live in your genes, all their faith and wisdom and resilience and fortitude and depth and commitment and sacrifice and spirituality and holiness and purity. It's all there, it's bustling there, it's embedded in the DNA, physically and spiritually. We carry the genes of Maimed Har Sinai, and we carry the genes of Avos, and we carry the genes of the Tanoim and the Amirayim and the Rishonim and the Acharonim. We may look in the mirror and feel that we're empty and dry, but look deeper. Give a Jew his or her proper sunlight. The Varimkeit, the sunlight, the Varimkeit of Yiddishkeit. Give them the water. The Gemara says in Baba Kama. Give them the earth, v'nafshi kafala kaltia, the humility and the vulnerability of a davening. Ofar, shivchi chamayim libech, noichach pnei Hashem, as the Navi says. And miracles will happen. You will see a tzaddik katomor yifroch, keres balvon and yiskeh.
TheYeshiva.net